Hi folks, my name is Warbass. I've had a lot of questions about what's going on in this case. If you don't know who I am or what this case is, just a quick overview of the spaghetti. This is something I refer to as my B case quite a bit. It is essentially a drum machine in Eurorack form, 7U, 104 HP, and a black hole case. Over there, just off screen, is my A case. Its role is more sample mingling, taking real-time audio, often from mics, but right now it's set up to take this case's audio and transform it into weird harmonic drones and textures and soundscapey kind of stuff. It also has my end of chain over there, which I've talked about in a lot of videos. So the sound you're going to hear from this case is going over into that case via these two cables. We'll talk about that in a second. Not a second, actually. This is going to be a long one. We're going to talk about this in like an hour. So the audio you're going to hear from the cases is being recorded by that case and likely just going to be going through Librelegio and then into the 4MS wave recorder over there, because that's traditionally what you will hear, excuse me, when you hear this case, especially in the July stuff. Although both instruments are meant to work independently, I've got my own little headphone out here, so I can take this as is by itself and still use it, but they kind of work together by design. So, excuse me, you're gonna need a lot of water breaks in this video tonight. That's fine. We're gonna kind of do a long, raw, unedited, extremely detailed walkthrough of this case's primary patch. I'm not going to do a patch from scratch because I quite like this patch as is. Maybe we'll do more patch from scratch stuff for manipulating other things, but this is how I've had it set up for the most part for the recent July videos, and so I'm just going to talk about it in this state. I don't have any other plans for module swaps for this case. I had some other thoughts, but I think they're going to impact that case more, so for the time being, this is kind of locked as is. All right, first we're going to talk about how this case is sequenced. It used to be the Erica Synth drum sequencer, kind of living in this range. I'm kind of doing that for scale because it was a beefy module. I have downsized to the Detroit Pink 87. It is a 8-channel trigger sequencer with a single button to play in the parts that you want on whatever channel you want with this knob that selects the channel. So I usually have one routed to kick, snare, hats, and then everything else in between. So I'm using 7 of these channels to play the 7 different voices out of the LXR. I'll talk about vice verga here in a second. The folks at Modular Plug who made Detroit Pink 87, this is their first module. They actually reached out to me, I think last fall-ish. It's been a while. To see if I'd be open to doing some feedback and kind of user testing of the module. So I've had it for quite a while, even though it's only been out for maybe a month or so. So you maybe have seen it in the corner of videos of mine this year so far. I did not expect to like it as much as I do. It is lovingly simple. You give it a clock that advances the step through 16, 32, or 64 length step sequences, and wherever that clock currently is, if you're in record mode, it will place a trigger in that spot. So in jam mode, I'm just jamming, nothing actually stays there. In record mode, that strangeness you're hearing is because I have Zadar doing some kit morphing on the LXR right now, so that's why that kick is kind of changing sometimes. If I want to clear that out, I just have to have that switch in clear, and then I can clear out that channel. It just so happened that when I pushed that button was the same time a trigger was already playing, so it sounded like when I hit clear it played again, but that's not the case. Clear just clears it. So the tricky thing about Detroit Pink is that there's not a ton of feedback for where you are in the pattern. There's a reset light that blinks each time it loops back around, which is super handy. However, it's still pretty quick, And if you are trying to play in something like just a 4 on the floor, I find it more useful to look over here at this light, kind of my master quarter note clock that's being converted into 16ths, which is what this is actually being triggered for. So I can go like a... and see if I can turn off that morphing so that you don't... There you go. Of course, I can then switch to channels. And you've got a little groove going, right? The 7 channels that are coming out of this right now are going in device Verga, which is a sequential switch that lets you mess with a bunch of channels in and channels out. So there's 8 ins, 8 outs. This is kind of funky left to right to right to left setup here. If I just turn this knob, I can reroute which drum is actually being played by the same aspects of the original pattern. So nothing changed on Detroit Pink, but instead of these 7 channels playing the 7 drums that I originally planned them to, I can come through and completely change that, or clock and CV control those sequences to randomly push the drums into a different spot, or really, really mess up the pattern super, super early. I think of it kind of like a limited use effect. I find it to be really fun to kind of overwhelm a single channel. So if we just clear out everything except the kick. Oh, I missed one. There we go. If I just basically fill nearly the whole pattern, you can get some really fun, like, I hate to call it affixy, but let's see, let's just grab this modulation. So now I'm just pulling, you know, basically a random CV value at the same drum speed that the triggers are being stepped through. So I really have only one channel with sequences on it, or triggers on it. It happens to be just constant. Again, that's our original, nearly constant. I missed one step, it sounds like. But I can really get it to be doing different things, where every single step is playing a different drum. I find that to be a nice way to have a different kind of effect, something that really changes what is a relatively static drum patch at times in terms of what is actually clocked into a sequence here. Because again, compared to the Erica synth sequencer that I had before, there's no banks, there's no saving. You turn your case off and back on, it is empty. There is no pattern linking or anything like that. Even muting the channels might be an alternate firmware they consider at some point. So it is really, really simple, bulletproof, but delightfully fun. Sits really, really well in the bottom right corner of a case. Being able to come back to this and have my right hand very familiar with where I'm at on this kind of channel selector, and that clicky keyboard button makes everything super nice and easy. So let's just get some drums back in there for the sake of having something to test with. All right, that's fine for now. The LXR, I usually have a couple of kits that I like to go to for the most part. I've had this thing for a long time at this point relative to the age of this case. I'm often using the CV in to morph between kits. So you can see, let's change the wave shape here so you can hear it maybe a little easier. Something longer. There's those super noisy ones. There we go. Anyways, I have lots of kind of home bases that I go to with the LXR, kits that I prefer, that I've slightly adjusted. But the one thing I've done above all, I'm gonna just come in so I can think for a second and pause that, or at least mute it. The one thing I've done more than anything else is adjust all of the output routing of every kit so that none of the effects are used. And so that I have, of the 1, 2, 3, 4 outs there, I have the kick on its own, the other low drums, and then a stereo set of the claps and hats and stuff. I think actually, if I look at the edit, let's go mix, snare, whoops, mix, where are we? L1. All right, so, wrong drum, stereo 2, R1, yeah. All right, kicks on the first one, the other two low drums are on the second one, and then everything else sits on this stereo pair. So that all comes up into the matrix mixer. The first kind of 3 rows of the matrix mixer are different drum elements. Again, you've got 7 different parts here. You don't have 7 outs. So these are kind of subgroups of the mix. This first column comes down, and everything's just cranked all the way up. I'll talk about this last row, which is not the LXR, just the first 3 of the LXR, are cranked and come out dry, basically, into the Cockpit 1U, which hopefully you can see down there, which comes across and is daisy chained behind the scenes into Golden Master, which is still going, of course. I didn't actually stop the sequence. I could do that there if I wanted to. I'm just going to leave it playing for the sake of this. Golden Master, we'll talk about a little bit as we kind of get into the rest of the chain, but this is the main place where signals begin to meet together, is in Cockpit after using the matrix mixer to customize how I want things to be routed through all the various effects and audio manipulation that is happening in other parts. So let's talk about those parts. The next channel here is adding audio up to be sent over into the 200 grits. So I'm still using the LRMSMSLR from Wrong to run a mid 100 grit and a side 100 grit. I have changed which joystick I'm using. I'm talking about this like you've seen older videos on this case, where I talk about this setup. I made a video specifically about this, probably a couple, I think, when I initially set it up. But I love the 100 grit. I wanted it in stereo. Running them as a left-right pair, I thought just didn't sound as pleasant because the squealing and getting them both to behave perfectly and have a benefit for them being stereo versus them kind of starting to hurt your ears, especially for headphone users like me. I'm always wearing headphones when I'm playing these cases, and I was listening back in headphones, so it was a little more disorienting. I found when I switched them to being mid and side with the LRMSMSLR module, which just means I take this stereo pair, bring it in the top, send one to a mid, where its distortion out comes back into the mid, send one to the side, and its distortion out comes back into the side, and then I have a new stereo pair that comes back down and joins the mix here. I'm then pretty much always taking the cutoff and playing it with a joystick. I used to use this joystick down here. It's been there for a long time. And I recently changed to save some HP, and I found, just in terms of joystick quality, if you just listen to this, let's see if you can hear it on my little voiceover mic. Maybe you can't hear that. You probably can see that though, how wiggly this thing is. I can shake this around and the joystick kind of flops all over the place. This is the only one I've had of these. I think I bought it used. I don't know if they're all like this. It stays where it's supposed to, but oh boy, is it loose and feel like it's an old, super old N64 controller or something, kind of fidelity. It does have 4 corners to its zones, which is kind of nice compared to this one, which is very smooth. But I would pick this over this feel every single day of the week. I found that I never used the other 3 channels on this, so I didn't really need it. I never used the LFO or random modes. I sometimes use the record mode because this wasn't clockable. You couldn't reclock that recording, it would just loop. It just wasn't something that I liked that much. So I wanted to save some HP. I went with this 7J by, I think it's called Transient, makes it. Transient modules, Transient something. And the build quality is just phenomenal. This is like, it feels like I'm in a aircraft carrier or something. I don't know. This feels very important. Super like smooth. You can bump it and it's not even gonna really move out of position. It stays exactly where you put it, and is really, really nice to hold on to. So if we bring some drums back in, let's bring in the 100 grits. So remember, the dry signal's still there, so let's take that out. This bottom left corner of the joystick then is low and low on the cutoff. That's going to be opening up the cutoff on the side 100 grit, this one, and opening up the cutoff on the mid 100 grit. I love these modules. Eric Schlappy, I think we all owe you a big thank you. That's not even getting into the things you can do by bridging your thumb across the 2 modules there. That is the entire drum patch, then of course going through the 100 grits in this mid-side setup and back into the cockpit and through Golden Master. But I like to bring the dry signal back in, so it's kind of like a parallel distortion. You're gonna hear me probably in this video talk quite a bit about how much I like playing filters, because that's essentially what I'm doing here, right? I'm playing 2 filters. It just happens to be with the joystick. And I've given up quite a decent amount of HP to what is essentially 1 stereo filter and an extremely good distortion. But the distortion aspects of it, I mostly leave kind of flat. You know, I pulled back the gain a little bit there. Sometimes I'll leave some room. Obviously, I didn't even realize I was running the mid 100 grit in 100x mode there, which is giving us a lot of extra noise in our mix, but whatever. There are aspects to these modules that are extremely playable. I am very frequently grabbing the resonance of the side 100 grit and just playing that as an extra, more melodic, I guess you can call it, element. Sorry, water break. You're gonna have to deal with listening to me as I get raspy here in the late evening hours and take water breaks on this. But this case has no like other oscillators, right? You could use some of these, FM drum channels as a note, and some of the kits in the LXR are a little more melodic or have some actual kind of tonal qualities to them, if that's even the word I'm looking for. I usually get most of that out of filters, and a lot of that comes from the 100 grits. And I've played around with other stereo distortions. I've got a stereo distortion in that case, the little mini guillotine over there, which is a stellar distortion for its size. But there's something about having one hand ready for a sequence, one hand here, being able to play the filters, and then of course some other things I've added that I'll talk about in a little bit. That is just, it feels like home to me for this case. It's just essential to how I think about it and how I make use of it. So let's continue talking about the rest of the Matrix Mixer, and then we'll get into what happens after Golden Master. The other channel here, this third channel, is determining what gets sent to Databender. So I usually pull the kick kind of out of what gets sent to Databender, and that's one of the reasons why I like the Matrix Mixer, because it gives me that flexibility to kind of decide how I want things to show up in the different modules. Databender, however, let's see if we can get this going. Let's start with it dry. Let's get our pattern back again. There it is. So the out of Databender, like the entire mix here from this channel is going into Databender. The out, though, I have coming all the way over into Zagrzeb with a high pass. So if I want all of Databender to showing up, I can leave this all the way down, or I can kind of cut it to a higher element. And that's just a secondary layer on top of this, not really wanting the kick to be there, because I feel like that kind of muddies out things a bit. Doesn't help that I have that's not bad. Of course, I have this in like the DJ filter mode. There's some value to that for sure. I tend to keep Databender at a higher place in the mix, letting the 100 grits take a lower place, and having most of what I've played sequence that low end, the kick, but being okay with what is like a hi-hat tone or a snare or a clap, those other mids and high elements in a percussion setup, being more random and chaotically chosen by Databender to supplement what I've got. The other nice thing is that it gives me another filter to play. Now, that's not doing a whole lot for me, but since I've brought Databender back into the Matrix Mixer and I'm having it join the dry signal here, that also lets me decide how much of it I want to go into the 100 grits. wanted to find a happy spot. So we pull the resonance back a little bit. So now I have kind of a combination of filters that I get to play with my left hand here. One that's on this data bender signal. But I can send a super high, like self-oscillating resonance into 100 grit to then re-resonate. And if I ever want to just quickly get data bender out, I can just throw the high pass all the way to the top and it's basically gone. So it makes a nice way for this case, which wouldn't really work from using like the dry wet here because there's already dry in other places and I wouldn't have to manage all of my dry signal as a portion of data bender. It lets me have data bender always with the mix fully engaged, mix in dry separately on my own, and then control in a performant way with other benefits and other features how I want data bender to come back in. Anyway. Okay. That's essentially everything that comes into Cockpit. Now, you'll probably guess this. This is my second time recording this video because the first one the camera was blurry. I had the manual focus set at the wrong depth. So hopefully this video right now is not blurry because I'm just going to post it no matter what. I do want to pause for a second to talk about Cockpit because I get a lot of questions about the tone or the distortion or like where does that come from, and a lot of it is that some of the kits here start out pretty harsh in a good way. The 100 grits are obviously layering in an insane amount of extra distortion. Liberlegio over there, I usually have the color knob cranked, which let's see, is it right now? Now it is. All right, so we'll see if that's any different in a second. But sneaky Cockpit 1U with no manual in existence has this headphone knob. Now, I think this was designed primarily to be an end of chain thing because we have a stereo headphone out, which I've never used. I have this daisy chain behind the scenes to Golden Master, which I've probably mentioned. And this headphone knob affects the volume of things that are in that daisy chain as well. So if I pull this back down, let's go just the dry signal here. So 100 grits are muted, data bender is muted by way of the filter. This is just basically the LXR at this point. Now, Desmodus is engaged at the end. We'll talk about that later. But what I want to describe, or at least have you hear, is what Cockpit does. That was like not a volume change, right? Like, what is that? Here, what's this part of the knob for? Where is unity gain on this thing? So there's from my perspective, clearly some drive going on here. Last time I checked, a manual didn't exist for this module. I kind of despise this module. Is it neat that it has side chaining? Yes. Is it one of the few modules I've ever seen that lets you optionally apply that side chaining to sub channels and not other channels, letting you mix your kick in at the same time of side chaining other things, creating one central mix? Yes. Do I even use it for that purpose right now? No. I could come over here with this and have the kick channel come through just here and have an extra kick, right? If I do that. But even that only works, and you're only hearing it in both ears because I cut this module open with an X-Acto and pulled out the part of the input jack that touches and reaches for a ring connection, because this is expecting a stereo in. And if I were to do this without modding this module, you'd only hear that in your left ear, which is ridiculous to me for a Eurorack module, kind of bucking the trend of a stereo single cable in that is also at Eurorack volume and not line level. But I can't even remember where this rant was going. There's some really neat things about the Cockpit 1U. And then there's stuff that I just don't understand. Why is that? Oh, also, these mutes don't actually mute. It's just like minus 60 dB, so it's absolutely possible for me to get the 100 grit to come through when it's muted. Great job. So, rant aside, where does, look, can you hear it right now? Everything's muted. Everything's muted. You hear that, right? Ridiculous. So if you ask me, where does the drive come from? Where's distortion? I don't know. A lot of this, some of this, sometimes maybe this knob too. No idea what's going on there. I'll accept it. I don't mind how it sounds. I think it's a decent drive. I think that's a better drive because, I mean, of course it is. Next. Oof. All right, next up. Golden Master. Again, because I've recorded this video a couple times, I can't remember what I've talked about in this video versus the past one, so I'm just going to explain it all over again. I have it in pink mode right now. This is EQ, compression, and stereo width. Typically, I pull the stereo width back a little bit, bringing the low end to the center, crank the stereo width up a bit to put the high end out wide, and let the mid sit just past noon, and kind of call it. I don't remember what I've done on the EQ and compression ones because, of course, you'd have to swing the knob around to, I think, catch where it was before and then bring it back. I can't remember if wiggling this here changes it relative to here. Like, did I just make it super low if I had it there before, or does it wait for me to catch? I don't know. It's a module with modes, which are the worst. It makes me kind of nervous and want to go back and wiggle things all around and then readjust them again. Like, I don't know, yeah, let's put some compression on the low end. The one thing I care about with Golden Master is that I can recenter the lows, stretch the highs, and I've got the ability to do these optional mutes. So if we just give you the lows back, that's all the way centered. It should sound pretty mono right now. That's it super wide. Which can be kind of nice sometimes in headphones, but with the other elements, this is pretty muddy to me. If everything's super wide, and it's almost like disorienting. So to be able to pull those lows back to the middle is kind of nice. It's one of the other reasons I usually grab this resonance knob and not this one. Right, that's now oscillating in the center. Now I've got both oscillating at the wide one. And of course, because these modules aren't perfect, those are two different tones, even though the cutoffs are being, I guess it was possible. My position wasn't exactly center, causing those to be different tones. But I usually ride for the wider aspects of signal for highs and let the low end sit in the middle. That's not any genius mix technique. That's just like 101 basic things that you might start to do when you have a chaotic mix to let things sit a little nicer. So one of the reasons I really like Jumble Hinge, and it still lives over in that case. I think I just got an alert that my camera is overheating, so we'll see how long that lasts. Out of Golden Master, the mix comes down and goes through Morphagene, which is kind of like a sleeper module in this case. Obviously powerful for lots of different stuff. I despise managing samples, so I use it for live looping. So let's see if I can get this back on green, which is the most finicky, annoying part. Do you see that? Come on, stay on green, stay on green. Green is playback speed, same as input speed. There we go. All right, let's have our pattern again. Now say I want to like save this. I've got this clocked coming through this mult here on the start of every pattern. So I can use record splice to arm a recording, and then once it starts, hit record again to cue that recording to stop. Whoops. We slower again. Did you hear that? Come on, there we go. So this is the live recording, right? Or not recording, this is the live case. This is our loop. See, I can mute stuff, nothing changes. I'm completely in the loop right now. Back to the live case, which is making no sound. Back into the loop. Now, I can use that to switch drum kits without you knowing. I can use that to cue up something crazier and weirder. Maybe I want to like have something super noisy and chaotic. And know I can get out of it because I've saved a safe spot. Maybe I want to record that craziness. And now I have the craziness recorded. And maybe what I want to get out to is a safe spot, right? It also lets me have like a little flavor of the A case here, because you can still with it, even though the main goal is for me just to have a easy, foolproof live looping setup. I tried to use Bitbox macro, I think, for this. And it was like 5 button presses for every new loop. Things would get unclocked. It was a disaster. I hated actually doing that. Here, it's hold record and hit click splice, let go. The light goes kind of dimly lit to arm the recording, fully lit once it's started, when it gets that next clock. Once it's fully lit, you just click it again, and it'll stop recording once it gets its next clock. So I know everything's always in time with everything else that's coming through. It's a delight. I love it. If I could do anything, it would be fix this god-awful Verispeed knob that is impossible to get back to green. It's insane how narrow it is to have this sit at the speed of the original recording. Mind-bogglingly bad. It takes, you know, an A module down to a C+, even though I still really like the parts that are good about it. It's a keeper C+, but holy cow, how do you make that hard to use? Anyway, out of Morphagene, we go up to Maelstrom Wyvern. I did a whole video on this, and then I realized the recording wasn't running. Can you tell them a little bit out of practice? This has been my favorite surprise module buy in a very long time. I got this as a test to see if I could replace the 100 grits, just to see. Maybe there's some HP I can save and get back, and I can bring something else in here. But let's listen to its impact on the sound. We'll do that. This is wet, by the way. That's been what the case has sounded like this whole time without Wyvern. That's it fully dry. So we'll dry wet knob at the bottom right there. Come on, right? So it's got a little boost, drive thing, gain. It's got its own set of filters that you can hold per oct. You can get it to self-oscillate. Which, in my experiments, has been best for these kind of low-end rumbles if you can get it at the right. Like that's the Wyvern kind of carrying that signal. Other reason why I put the whole mix through the Wyvern is because of this little guy way down here, high pass filter, or high pass amount. I've got that mapped over to one of the rows of transitions, which also controls the dry wet on Desmodus and also controls a little bit of the chaoticness on the data bender. So if I want to just do the classic, pull out the low end, crank the reverb, and then give it back. It's very, very easy. That just is so satisfying to do. It makes this corner of the case really powerful but simple. I've got one big knob, one joystick, and one crossfader. I really don't have to touch all of these tiny trim pots, and they're actually kind of hard to bounce into or bump into and cause anything else to go awry. I got the resonance here that also is hard to bump into and doesn't have a huge impact. If anything, sometimes I just slowly pull it down to get Data Bender to stop being self-oscillating. It's such a nice set of variety of no-look performance features where I can be focused on something else with my right hand, something custom, maybe something I don't have CV control for, and I know exactly what's going to happen. It's very, very easy to get comfortable with that. And of course, because Wyvern and Desmodus are happening after Morphagene, I can still do this high-pass reverb pull on a loop. So I can combine those. That was not the best one. Can't find the one, but you get the point. It gives me a ton of options. There we go. A ton of options to be able to have these kind of pre-sound effects. I didn't mean sound effects. Pre-sound, pre-audio effects in terms of vice versa, screwing up the pattern before I even have the pattern converted to audio. Then I have a choice of how I want to route that audio through two different feedbackable patched kind of effects before things go into a mixing stage, both that have each have their own filter that can self-oscillate. Then I've got the kind of playable EQ here if I want to, which I find handy to go to like a straight low end if I want to. Then I can loop that and have control over a crazy good saturation drive filter boost thing. It's so much more than it is on paper, I feel like. Plus, Desmodus chilling here as a barely mentioned reverb, because I feel like everyone who wants a Desmodus already has one or knows enough about them that they don't need my opinion on it. It's fine, whatever. This case offers me a really nice mix of places to apply and places to perform throughout the set. So I can change between kits. I can animate across kits. I can change the pattern. I can play these different filters. I can mess with the audio in Data Bender, get it all crunchy or chop it up and all over the place. I can really screw with the drive or filtering with Wyvern, get crazy reverby, and still then quickly bring it back to home and deliver on a drop or a beat change or something in a pretty small form factor. Like I'm quite pleased that I'm able to do all of those things in this size of a case and still have room for, some attenuators, super handy dual CVable DC coupled crossfader and access. I've got lots of channels on Zadar that I don't always use. At the same time, none of these modules are like necessarily small, right? Nothing's purposely being packed into a small space. Yeah, I switched joysticks because I wasn't really using half of it, but I'm not here cramming in a whole bunch of 2 HP. I got one 2 HP module, but nothing's like the miniature version of things. There's an emphasis on performance, there's an emphasis on playability and control, and a really tightly tuned init patch of how I want things to work that gives me still lots and lots of control and customization. That is just a lot of fun. It's a joy. In the July sets, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of talking in this 50-some minute video right now, I basically play something with this case, then I sample it with that case. Then I will fade this case out and play the same audio, just granularized and resynthesized and everything in that case for a while, then fade back in this case. That's kind of the, you see me walking around the spinny camera rig, that's kind of what I'm doing. Getting something going, getting it to a place where I like it. Right now I'm doing that sampling, I think this is just out of frame, on miso cornflakes. I used to do it on the instrument looper, which I still have and will never sell. I love that thing. Probably will come back into that case at some point. But that's the dance. Play a full sounding set here, bring it over there for crazy weird sound manipulation, pull it into a drone for 10 minutes and then come back over here and play some bad techno. Lots has changed, I think, in this case in the last year, or at least since last July. It's very, very different since last time. I think I even had Polygogo back then. But it is, I think, much more fun than it was a year ago, and it is much more refined, while still maintaining quite a bit of the sound. I think the sound has improved, and the features have improved. I think it's a much better instrument on its own, too, with the placement of its own reverb, even though I've got Starlab just out of frame there. I'd pick Starlab over Desmodus all day, but it's nice to be able to have that here. And I think a creative reverb works a little better on FM drums anyway, versus applying that kind of reverb to other signals. So I don't know. I really, really like it. If you made it this far into this video, excuse me, if you made it this far into this video, then thank you. Actually, here's a little treat. If you made it this far into this video, I just got the OAM Time Machine from Olivia Arts in this case over here, and I just want you to hear it for a sec. Ooh.